about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
On the 13th of April 2003, when I went back to the museum, it was something like as if a hurricane had hit. Completely everything was destroyed. All the documents were on the floor. All the equipments were stolen. And what about the museum itself? It had really a catastrophe. Because the looters were inside the galleries, the looters were in the storerooms. And for me, that was the first time in my life to see a museum been looted in that way. It had been ransacked completely. What they could not take, they smashed. During the fall of Baghdad, and what we saw of these horrible scenes of the looting all over the city, and what happened to the museum, this was not the only thing. The main problem was the archaeological sites, the chaos that was there, the insecurity that was there. It was a kind of looting all over the country, but looting the archaeological sites, that was the most dangerous thing. Destroying all the texture of these archaeological sites by just digging in a crazy way, and then extracting all these antiquities, thousands of antiquities. We have from those sites that people brought to the museum around 17,000 objects. If we have these 17,000 objects in the museum, how much has been taken outside? The markets are full of clay tablets from only one site, Ummah. Thousands of clay tablets are in Europe, in America, or even even in Japan. But what are we doing for that? We have to work together on that. It's not something that they are losing and tomorrow with the prices of oil they can buy it again. It's something that has been lost and can never be bought again. It's something that will be lost and we can never have it. It's gone for good. It is actually the memory of the Iraqi people. These are the memories of the mankind that are there, and they are lost. Let's gather together and see what we can do so that people will not forget what happened. And maybe we can have this a kind of every year event so that we will not forget. Let's gather together here in Stony Brook. We will gather together with a lot of students and faculty to remember those 3 days. And if you can gather together and remember and light a candle. Light a candle is a very nice symbol so that we will not forget.
Recovering memory and identity, this is how Iraq's foreign minister describes the return of these antiquities from the United States.
We have received 17,321 pieces from the United States, 9 from Japan, 7 from the Netherlands and 1 from Italy. Therefore, the total number is 17,338 returned pieces this year.
Dated between 3,700 and 4,000 years ago, some of these artifacts were looted from the National Museum in Baghdad. Others were excavated from archaeological sites across the country.
We have on our side local laws, international conventions, and the laws of the countries which our antiquities were smuggled to. So smugglers are condemned by such laws and will eventually be forced to return the pieces.
According to the Culture Ministry in Baghdad, most of the pieces relate to trade deals during the Sumerian period, one of the earliest known civilizations in Mesopotamia, now southern Iraq. One in particular, though, was the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, with text from one of the world's oldest works of literature. During years of conflict in Iraq, thousands of antiquities have been looted and archaeological sites destroyed. Officials here say many precious artifacts are still unaccounted for. Thousands of priceless items went missing from the National Museum in Baghdad after the 2003 US-led invasion. And ancient statues and monuments were either destroyed by ISIL or under consecutive Iraqi governments suffered damage and neglect. The thousands of returned artifacts are now back in Baghdad for Iraqis who feared they'd lost a huge part of their heritage to enjoy. Mahmoud Abdul Wahid, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
All right. This is just sort of an impromptu video I'm making here. Somebody I know on, I think, Facebook sent me an email recently that really caught my attention, and I decided to vet what was sent and found it was true. So I'm putting this video together to document it in case things change in the near future. Wouldn't be surprised. We've seen that before. Do a live stream and then shortly thereafter the evidence disappears. So just putting this out there for your consideration. If you've been following my work, you know that I've been talking about the discovery of Gilgamesh in the desert of Iraq in April of 2003. In fact, it's a primary plot point in my Seed series, if you've been following what I'm doing with Seed as well. The archaeologists digging around in the desert sands of Iraq, they found the body of Gilgamesh in April of 2003. I've been talking about this at least since 2010. This is my old YouTube channel, Captain Mang, and just scroll through these videos and you'll see stuff related to some of that here in the identity of the Antichrist. You know, you believe, you know that I believe that Nimrod is the Antichrist of the end times. And there was a video I did, this one right here, the Omega Plan, released 8 years ago, so 2012, but I actually produced it in 2011. I created the video in 2011, started doing conferences and stuff, and then after that I started posting it on YouTube and stuff. So you could watch this whole 22-minute video if you go to Captain Mang, CPTMANG, that was my high school nickname, Captain Mang, and just type in the Omega Plan in the search window, and you'll find it, or just do a Google search for, or a YouTube search for the Omega Plan ? You can watch the whole video there. I'll actually play some of it for you here in a minute, because I did post it also on my primary YouTube channel now, my Rob Skiba YouTube channel, where I talk about identifying Nimrod as the Antichrist using Scripture and talking about a potential Omega Plan. All that's there. Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, myself, and others, we've told you that the military gained control of that dig and took the body away. Right after they found Gilgamesh, it was taken away by the military. And then 1 month later, we set up the military occupation phase in Iraq, and we built the largest embassy in the world, at least at that time. I don't know if there's been a bigger one built since then, but at least at that time it was the largest embassy ever built. And one of the first things our troops did was raid the Museum of Baghdad. You could look that up. Yeah, well, actually, I'll show you a video that shows you that in a second here. And there's something like, I think somewhere in the vicinity of 200,000 items were stolen, and but most of them were recovered. But of the 3,000 or so items that were never returned, those items included cuneiform tablets and other things dealing with resurrection and the afterlife. Yeah. So again, all that's documented here. I'll just go ahead and play one of these videos here. Let's see which one. Let's try from my Genesis Revelation Part 4. This was a conference that I did in Oklahoma in February 12, 2016. And so this talks about that portion of the Omega Plan, so I'll play that for you here.
And they're always talking about the big financial collapse that's coming, right? I mean, how many trillions of dollars are we in debt right now? But of course, all of that could change like that with a revalue of the Iraqi dinar. It would reset everybody's economy. And if we believe that the first Babylon will be the last Babylon, like the title of my book, the first shall be the last, then, you know, I know a lot of people out there saying the United States is Babylon or New York is Babylon. I understand the arguments, but I'm going to go with a biblical interpretation. They had no idea of New York, the United States, and all indications, especially with the Yahuwah Triangle series that I was talking about, those are the 3 points that the Bible bounces around. Egypt, Israel, Assyria, Babylon, as in Iraq. So if that's the case, then obviously things have to change such that that place becomes a pretty hopping area for everybody to later mourn what happens. So could it be that top dog U.S. eventually is toppled or done away with or what have you, and then everything raises up over there? I don't know, but after we left there, we left 500 military bases and millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of state-of-the-art military equipment, and we built the largest embassy in the world there. Something's going on. December 21st, 2010, his nation, Nimrod's nation, was born again out of the ashes like a phoenix as a blood-red moon floated over the shoulders of Orion like a decapitated head, and the entire planet shook. Our soldiers have been at war for nearly a decade, waging urban warfare. December 11th, our troops were ordered out of Iraq, leaving behind hundreds of millions of dollars worth of military equipment and bases. December 31st, 2011, Obama signed the NDAA into law, making it possible to indefinitely detain American citizens without trial or legal representation, simply for being suspected of being a terrorist. And that definition of terrorist is whatever they make up for the day.
Which I would allow. That's us when we realize we don't want to serve the District of Columbia.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Oh, you want to get together and listen to this crazy Rob Skiba guy talk about flat Earth and the Bible and all kinds of stuff like that? Terrorists! That's all they have to do.
Right, because I'm going to say, the deal is if we're against Washington, D.C. because it's Masonic, it's
Yeah.
Nimrod,
That-
then
That's all they have to do is whatever they decide.
That does make us
Yeah, basically, the United States, unfortunately, is following the Nazi playbook to the letter. If you just look at what Hitler and the SS and what they did with the Reichstag and everything that led to what they did thereafter, it's following the same formula. Now, I gave you an outline of what I was seeing in my research. Now I'm going to play a video for you that shows our U.S. presidents and mainstream news reports and things like that, illustrating what I've been talking about playing out right before our eyes.
Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you.
On August the 17th, 1991, Desert Shield became Desert Storm. The conflict was witnessed by millions through the eye of CNN and the BBC, showing propaganda of the systematic eradication of Saddam's forces by a coalition far superior in technological, political, and economic power. The orchestrators of the war were by no means strangers to controlling major world events. In fact, they have done so for centuries. From the shadows, they have engineered every major war, revolution, and recession. They control everything you read, everything you hear, and everything you see. They have managed to indoctrinate an entire populace to their way of thinking and have infiltrated key positions in places of authority. And it is from the shadows that they have created a new political order, a new economic order, and more sinister, a new religious order. Their ultimate aim is total global domination, and they will stop at nothing to reach their goal. The goal that was outlined in a speech given by former President of the United States, George Bush.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
We talk so much about dispelling myths. How about confirming one? What is this?
Susie, this is the tomb of Osiris.
The god of the underworld. This once extravagant mausoleum, a moat with 4 pillars engraved with hieroglyphics constructed thousands of years ago, was intended to be a shrine for the keeper of the afterlife.
Polls have just now closed in 6 additional states, representing 66 electoral votes.
We must follow no other course. Now it is a seed upon the wind, taking root in many nations. We will confront weapons of mass destruction. We will build our defenses beyond challenge, lest weakness invite challenge. This work continues. The story goes on, and an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm.
Heard the first one come in. I didn't know what it was. It sounded like a missile.
Oh my God, Ed, another plane just hit the World Trade Center.
Wait, oh my God, the building fell!
We have no idea what caused this.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world, using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them
and the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. You will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.
Imagine the startling proposition that the Nephilim, the giants, the mighty men of old, the gods and children of the Watchers, could somehow rise up, could somehow be reconstituted inside of a body. And, of course, I've discussed with you before my theory that one of the greatest legends in history could be a record of that having actually happened. And I'm referring to Nimrod, who some scholars also identify as Gilgamesh of Sumerian fame, Apollo of Greek fame, Osiris of Egyptian fame. And this Gilgamesh was a giant who a lot of people didn't even believe was anything more than myth until his grave marker was found a few years back. And then, according to some people, the military swooped in and took possession and control of that dig.
Hey, Tom, I want to interject something. I talked to a special operations general who was there when Gilgamesh's remains, and his words were he was in a state of remarkable preservation, okay? He said they have Gilgamesh's remains. So if they have Gilgamesh and he is Nimrod, they got it. And the whole point was to extract the DNA.
When the Iraqi regime fell in April 2003, the Iraqi Museum in Baghdad and museums in other provinces such as Mosul, Basra, and Babel were exposed to theft for 2 consecutive days. The theft was carried out by local and international networks as well as Iraqi and Arab agents. It is estimated that 170,000 artifacts were stolen, 15,000 of which have no registration records. The most important of these artifacts are the Sumerian cuneiforms, which represents the philosophy of life and death.
Many date back to Mesopotamian times, more than 4,000 years ago.
Artifacts pertaining to the civilizations of the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Chaldeans, and others that go back thousands of years in history, were taken away from the land of the 2 rivers.
In addition, entire book collections from certain historic eras disappeared from the National Library, thus negatively affecting Iraq's wealth of civilization and culture.
One must also mention that some artifacts were stolen and sent to Israel via the American forces.
American troops stood by as Iraq's heritage was plundered. One memorable moment that week was when Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld dismissed the looting in Baghdad as unimportant.
Freedom's untidy, and free people are free to make mistakes and commit crimes and do bad things.
Many of the looters knew which objects they were looking for and where to find them. In other words, they were insiders.
Investigations revealed that the main metal gate of the storage rooms was opened. It was not opened by force, which means a person who knew where the key was participated in the theft.
J.P. Morgan.
Okay, I'll stop there. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to watch the rest of it. But that was the main point that I wanted to get across anyway, was that, yeah, the body of Gilgamesh had been found, and at least according to Steve Quayle's sources, the primary objective was the extraction of DNA. And so somebody named Steven sent me a screen capture of the State Department's Freedom of Information Act, a search that was done there. I'll put the link for the search so you can do it yourself. But here's the page, and the search criteria, I'll put the URL in the show notes. Actually, I'll post it in the chat room here for you too. Also, sorry I wasn't paying attention to the chat room, guys. See a bunch of people here. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. So there's the link to the Freedom of Information Act that takes you to this page right here. And then if you type in this person's name, Denetra, something like that, you'll see this link right here, Department of State Freedom of Information Act Log 2018. And if you click on that, it takes you here, and requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh and the location of his body and the location of buried Nephilim. I don't know why everything's highlighting when I do this. What? So, this may be just somebody's Freedom of Information Act request, which would be, anybody could send a request for something like that, or perhaps there might be something to it. I don't know. But this is the first time I've heard of anything related to the Gilgamesh event since 2003, because after the body was recovered, you haven't heard anything. I mean, it was taken away by the military, presumably, and maybe it's in Area 51 or something. Who knows? Nobody knows what happened to it after that, and at least I'm not aware of anybody coming forward as a whistleblower or exposing anything, saying where the body is or what they're doing with it. This is the first thing I've seen, and this was apparently a Freedom of Information Act request or an email or something that took place on December 13th, 2018. I just find it interesting that it's under the parameters of the collection of the Clinton emails, and that you can see that in the let me see if I can lower this a little bit. Oh, you can see it right there. Yeah, so if you can see the top of my URL screen right there, it's freedomofinformationact.state.gov/search/results.aspx / search text dash collection equals Clinton dash or underscore email 20% and Nephilim. So anyway, this just caught my attention today. Wanted to put it out there real quick just to get it out there, because who knows, these things tend to disappear right after I find them. And same thing I've seen happen with other people as well. Researchers get out there, they find something, they put it out there, and it disappears. So I don't have time to go look any deeper into this right now, because I'm already deep into doing a whole lot of other things that I got to get done. So I'm putting it out there for you guys. If you guys want to dig deeper and let me know what you find, that would be awesome. Leave your comments below. All right, thanks guys. Have a good day.
For 3 years of intense military training, I had become a Navy SEAL, joined my first SEAL team, which was SEAL Team 2 in Virginia, and I had joined my platoon, my 25-man platoon. We had gone through all this additional training at the team to prepare for deployment, and here I was 3 years to the day, almost exactly, from when I went to boot camp, getting ready to deploy as a Navy SEAL to Afghanistan. But none of that training would prepare me for how intense my first couple of weeks in Afghanistan would be. So the flight to Afghanistan is pretty routine until you enter Afghanistan airspace, when your pilots let you know, hey, you've entered Afghanistan airspace. They turn the lights to red in the inside of the plane, and they get ready to descend very rapidly into the base where we would be landing. we can't afford to be in the air for any longer than we have to be because there's a risk of getting shot. So there's a super steep descent, and then they tell you to stay away from the windows, right? So you're avoiding the windows in case you get shot at. And I remember thinking like, wow, like this is really it. We're here, we're in a war zone. Like we're nosediving into bases to avoid getting shot at. Like it was intense, and I'm in my 20s. Like it was just kind of cool. Then the ramp opened, the back of the plane opened, and we all got out, and we're inside of this very well fortified base. We're safe in here. And immediately I was struck by the just stunning beauty of the landscape. And I remember looking out at all these snow-covered mountains, and I remember thinking like, how is this a war zone? This is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. I don't think I really appreciated just how foreign of a place Afghanistan is relative to where I come from. We get out to our site, and that night they wanted to go, they being the team that we were relieving, they wanted us to go on an operation. We were going to be up in the mountains. And I remember distinctly them talking about the cave systems that were in these mountains. And I remember thinking like how creepy that was, that we would be up on these mountains, walking around. It's so isolated, it's so foreign, and there could be like people hiding in caves that we could accidentally fall into one of their caves. Like it really, really creeped me out. And so I was talking about how creepy these caves were, and the interpreter was like, what's really creepy is back in 2002, there was this fairly well documented case of another special operations unit, the Army Green Berets, coming in contact with a creature in a cave, and they actually got into a battle with it, and they lost one of their soldiers to this creature, and it was fairly well documented, but then it was quickly kind of silenced. I mean, certainly the story was interesting, but I didn't really believe it. Maybe it was some animal, maybe it was some person, whatever it was, there was some explanation to it. It wasn't until now that I actually started exploring different strange occurrences and strange events, and I looked and found some testimony from one of the soldiers that came forward anonymously, who was a part of this operation where they came in contact with this creature in Kandahar. And what struck me about his testimony is it sounds authentic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell that soldier's story, and I'm going to tell the other kind of corroborating witness stories as well, to try to give you a picture of what happened in Kandahar in 2002, and you can be the judge if you think this is fact or fiction. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place, because that's what my channel is all about, and I upload 3 to 4 times a week. So if that interests you, I would encourage you to please gently ravage the like button and then subscribe to my channel and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of those 3 to 4 weekly uploads. All right, guys, let's get into the story. In 2002, an Army infantry unit just vanished. They were on patrol in the Kandahar mountain range in Afghanistan, and they stopped using the radios. They stopped calling in. No one knew what was going on. They didn't call in a TIC, which stands for Troops in Contact. Basically, any military unit, if you're out on an operation and you start getting shot at, you radio in to your higher command, hey, troops in contact, or TIC, which signals to them you need to get aircraft on standby, you need to get ready to send reinforcements, they need to be ready to support you. But they only do that if you signal that you're in a TIC. And it's, a lot of people, if anything, will call it in too early. Units are known to call it in almost prematurely sometimes. And so the idea that a unit would vanish without calling in a TIC or any sort of communication about any gunfight or any ambush or anything, it's a little bit strange. And so they disappear. The Army decides that in order to find them, because this is obviously a really big deal, they would get their most elite unit, so the Army Green Berets, that's their very elite special forces, they would send them out to find this missing unit. And so one soldier that was a part of that elite special forces detachment, who just goes by Mr. K, he would come forward years later and tell the story of what happened once they were tasked with this mission. So they leave via helicopters and they fly out to the Kandahar mountain range, about 4 clicks, so 4 kilometers about, from where they believed was this infantry unit's last known location. And so they land and they start doing this fairly methodical search through the mountainside. They knew that they were in enemy territory, and at any time they could get into a gunfight, they could be ambushed, There's all these cave systems all over these mountains. And so it's slow moving to begin with. Plus, they're looking for this lost infantry unit. So it's just a very slow movement through the mountains. And so over the first few days, nothing really happened. They didn't come in contact with the enemy. They didn't see any sign of this missing infantry unit. They just walked along the mountains carrying a bunch of gear, and that was it. At some point, they noticed a little bit farther ahead that there was this distinct pathway leading up the mountain and kind of around the corner. And it looked like a goat trail. There were lots of goats that would run around the mountainside, and it looked like a very well-developed goat trail. And they decided, let's just go up there. If nothing else, we can go up onto wherever this leads us and maybe look down across the other side of the mountain and see if we can see anything. And so the team starts making their way up this goat trail, and as soon as they start making their way up, they start noticing that there are little pieces of American military equipment on the ground. There are pieces of radios, like whip antennas and housing of the actual radio itself. They found military-style backpacks as well, and they started finding pieces of uniforms that belonged to the missing infantry unit. They knew based on the patches that were on these uniforms. So as they're walking up this trail of broken equipment and uniforms, they start seeing some bone on the ground. They didn't know if it was human bone or what. They start seeing broken bones scattered on their way up to this kind of plateau. And so now the Special Forces team, I mean, they're incredibly well trained. I mean, I'm not just being biased here. I mean, the Army Green Berets, the Army Special Forces, they're very similar to the Navy SEAL teams, which I was a part of. Two different units, no doubt, but very much peers. And the level of training you get in handling situations like this one, now granted this one's pretty unique, you're so well trained that when things start getting dangerous, it's like your training just kicks in, and everybody's does. And so I would imagine that when they saw this, what they were thinking is this was an ambush. This infantry unit was ambushed, and we're probably coming up on the ambush site. And so they're, taking defensive positions, and they're moving slowly and very tactically up this mountain, and they're keeping their weapons pointed at the leading edge on their way up to the top of this mountain. They get to this plateau. It's like a flat section of the mountain, right? It's like a steep mountain, and there's like this little shelf almost. And there's more equipment scattered and more bones scattered across it. And there's all these cave entrances right in front of them. It's as if they were intentionally placed so that they fed out onto this shelf. And so they start moving towards the mouth of the caves. And they realize, without even getting very close, that even though the mouth of these caves are pretty large and everybody could go into the cave, there is a steep drop-off. Like you'd walk in and then it just goes straight down. And someone kind of peered over the edge and couldn't see how far it went down. And they decided that it was just too dangerous to go in there, because clearly something happened here where American lives were lost, based on the tattered uniforms and equipment. And so let's just pull back and take up defensive positions looking at the entrance to all of these cave entrances. And so as leadership goes down kind of out of the fatal funnels, if you will, outside of these caves, Mr. K, who's the guy who's told us this whole story, he said he's looking at one of the entrances to the caves and he sees a flash of movement inside of the cave. And he looks over at it. He doesn't have time to react to it or anything. And all of a sudden a spear comes flying out of the cave. This big, massive lance comes flying out, and it goes right through one of his teammates whose name was Dan. And so Dan's down. And so the whole team saw that. They didn't see who threw it, but they certainly saw the spear hit Dan. And so as they're shocked and just keeping their weapon up, wondering what's going to happen, out runs this, by Mr. K's account, a 12 to 15 foot tall man with a red beard and red hair down past his shoulders, comes charging out, howling like a war cry. He's got animal skins for clothes. He just looks super dirty, and he runs over to Dan to pull the spear out and probably use it again. And the rest of the team at this point is broken out of their shock of what they're seeing, and they start engaging this giant. And the giant didn't really have a chance to fight back, and in 30 seconds, the giant is down too. So Dan's down, and the giant is down. And the whole team is like, what just happened? So after the dust had settled and all the shooting had stopped, they went to check on Dan, and Dan had passed away. And so they called back into higher headquarters, and they're trying to describe what happened. A very large, possibly human creature threw a projectile that hit Dan. And so they sent 2 helicopters out, one to retrieve Dan and the team, the other just to hoist up this very large human-like creature because they wanted to know what it was. And they struggled mightily to get the netting around this big creature. It ended up weighing over 1,100 pounds. It had 6 toes on each foot and it had 6 fingers on each hand. They load it up, they string it onto this helo, and it takes off. And the team gets into the other helicopter and they go back expecting to be debriefed as soon as they get back to base. The helicopter with the Giant would fly to an airfield and they would meet up with a crew of a C-130, which is another big military aircraft. The pilot of that craft would publicly say that he remembers seeing a 12 to 15 foot tall giant person with 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. And he would say that's what he saw, even though it was later redacted and made top secret. Mr. K and his team, they flew back to the base to be debriefed. And so they had to provide an after action report. It's something done in the military. You go out, you do any operation, you come back, and you write up what happened. And so Mr. K and his team decided to just be honest about what they saw. And so they described it again in detail, 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. It came out, it threw the spear, it hit Dan, it's this horrible situation. And once they submitted it, their leadership said, you got to rewrite that. We're not going to accept that. So Mr. K said they ultimately rewrote it, and it just sounded like a typical engagement in the mountains with the enemy. And it was made top secret, and then they never saw it again. And that was it. Mr. K said that he and the rest of his team also had to sign non-disclosure agreements to not ever talk about what they saw. And they never got any word about what actually happened, what did they do with the body of the Giant, and they just never got any clarity out of it. It was just basically made top secret, redacted, and they were told don't talk about it. So it would take until 2016 when Mr. K finally just said, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna go public with what I saw because my friend died and they're acting like, this didn't happen, but it did happen. And so that's why we have this detailed report of this mission where they came in contact with the Giant of
Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Ashur, and builded Nineveh, and the city of Rehoboth, and Calah. And Resen, between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city.